Back at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, where Short's body had been recovered 2 days earlier, resident Rowdy Foreman was out fishing with his son and daughter when he made a curious discovery along the shore.
We came across a wooden dowel, a brace, if you want to call it that, and it was just out of place.
Alongside the chair part, Foreman also found a piece of duct tape. Having seen pictures in the newspaper, he believed it may have been from the chair found with Short's body. He sent his son to fetch plastic bags from his house in order to preserve his find. Sheriff Don Schlesman and a partner drove to Oklahoma to question Foreman about the discovery.
And they asked me, do you have a piece of evidence? I told them, I don't know if it's evidence. I said, I found a piece of duct tape. And his first comment was, "Oh my God, isn't that pretty?" And they were looking at the fingerprint, just clear as day as a print there.
The fingerprint appeared to be made from car grease, impervious to the lake water. But investigators still had to prove the tape was used in the crime.
Although the tape contained fingerprints, that piece of evidence was not relevant unless it could be proven to be part of the chair or the apparatus in which Mr. Short was drowned.
To prove that, FBI examiners would have to match the glue and strands from the torn piece of tape with the tape found on the chair. But that would take weeks. Until then, the FBI and local investigators still had no prime suspects for the crime.
911, what is the emergency?
A week after the robbery of the State Bank of Noel, Missouri, and the brutal murder of its president, Dan Short, the FBI had recovered Short's body, the murder device, and a possible fingerprint from a nearby lake. Investigators fielded calls from residents who were willing to help, but also afraid to do so. Farley received one such call from a man who claimed his friend might have information about the chain hoist wrapped around the chair that drowned Dan Short. The friend's name was Wayne Boutain. Boutain owned a chain hoist which had recently been stolen. Though he notified the police, the hoist was never recovered. He suspected the Agofskis of stealing it. Farley showed Boutain the photos of the hoist investigators had retrieved from the lake. Boutain identified it as his own. He recognized damage on the pulley. He'd last seen the apparatus at Sheila Agofsky's house where he had once lived. Boutain agreed to take a polygraph test and passed it. On the strength of Boutain's statement, Farley decided to question the Agofskys again. Driving up to their mother's house, he noticed an old van in the front yard. It closely matched the description of one of the vehicles Buddy Mills saw the night of the bank heist.
Can I help you with anything?
Yes, ma'am.
Farley questioned Sheila about the missing chain hoist, but she claimed to have no memory of it. She also corroborated Shannon's alibi, saying he was at her house the night of the murder.
I don't know anything about it. I have no idea.
Okay. Okay.
I can't help you with anything.
I appreciate your time. We'll be back in touch.
Farley left with suspicions that she knew more than she was telling. He asked the brothers to give their fingerprints, hoping to match the one found on the duct tape. Joe Agofsky complied. When asked about the hoist, he told Farley he remembered seeing it at his mother's house, yet he didn't know what became of it. A few days later, Farley returned to Sheila Agofsky's.
I'm Special Agent Farley.
There he found Shannon with a friend by the name of Gant Sanders. Having secured Joe's fingerprints, Farley tried to convince Shannon to give his as well.
Set of his fingerprints. It'd make things a lot easier. Possibly get you out of some trouble.
Shannon echoed his mother's story, proclaiming he had no knowledge of the chain hoist.
I'll be seeing you guys later.
He eventually promised Farley he'd come down to the police station to give his prints, but he never showed. Although Farley had initially dismissed the Agofskis as suspects, he took note that Shannon and Joe's memories of the chain hoist were conflicting. Now, he decided to take a closer look into their background. Researching the family's financial records, Farley discovered that 9 years earlier they had received money from an insurance settlement after their father died in a plane crash. Popular opinion was that their money was still plentiful, making them unlikely candidates for bank robbers. But Farley learned that wasn't so.
While they had all received a considerable sum of money, as of that time, Joe had spent his. Their mother had spent a large portion of hers, and Shannon Agofsky had a considerable amount of money still in a fund, but it was not available to him at that time until he was 21.
Agents found that both brothers had recently purchased cars with cash, yet neither had jobs. Investigators also determined that 18-year-old Shannon had spent more than $5,000 since the heist. Although the Agofsky brothers' spending looked suspicious, Farley still had no solid evidence linking them to the bank robbery and murder. Revisiting crime reports and witness statements, he made a new connection. Truck driver Buddy Mills said he had seen 3 vehicles leaving Noel on the night of the robbery. That meant there was a possible third suspect out there. If 2 of the vehicles were driven by the Agofsky brothers, then perhaps the other was driven by one of their friends. Farley recalled the young man he met briefly on the Agofsky's porch the day he questioned Shannon, Gant Sanders. Sanders had recently become Shannon's roommate. Farley tracked him down at a junkyard.
The closest associate that we could identify of both Shannon and Joe Agofsky was Gant Sanders. It was learned that Gant had been good friends with both Joe and Shannon, both prior to and after the robbery and murder.
But Sanders said he knew nothing about the robbery and murder, although he offered no alibi for the night in question. Farley decided to question Shannon again, this time with a polygraph machine.
Take a chain hoist from Wayne Butane's.
The test was administered in a motel room by a technician from Springfield, Missouri.
Did you kill Dan Short?
No.
Based on his physiological responses, the examiner determined that the younger Agofsky brother was deceptive about his knowledge of the crime. It was clear to Farley that Shannon was somehow involved.
You do.
But he'd need more convincing evidence to bring charges.
Figure out what's best for yourself.
In December 1989, the Agofskys were subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury to answer questions under oath. Each family member gave testimony separately. Shannon, Joe, and Sheila each disavowed any knowledge of the bank robbery and the murder of Dan Short. After questioning, Shannon was once again asked to supply his fingerprints voluntarily.
Can you tell me where these are?
Again, he agreed and set an appointment. In Washington, D.C., FBI analysts continued to examine the items sent to them by the agents in Noel, trying to match the chair part and tape retrieved by Foreman to the chair and tape that had been bound to Dan Short. An examiner confirmed that the wood found by Rowdy Foreman was part of the same chair that Dan Short was taped to. The piece of tape with the fingerprint on it was the most promising piece of evidence. But did it match the tape used on the chair and body? It did. Examiners were conclusively able to link these portions of tape by matching the torn ends, the fibers, and the glue. The tape found by Foreman had 2 complete prints on it. They compared the prints to Joe Agofsky's, but they did not match. Farley recalled this finding was not all bad news.
The fingerprint examiner notified me that the prints on the tape were similar to that of Joe Agofsky, but not identical. And he advised me that the fingerprints of siblings were often similar in pattern. Therefore, getting the fingerprints of Shannon Agofsky was imperative.
Although he told the grand jury he would provide his fingerprints, Shannon never did. But this time, Farley would force Shannon to comply by serving him with a subpoena. Grudgingly, Shannon Agofsky gave his prints to the FBI almost 5 months after the heist and murder. Since comparing his prints to those found on the tape would take several weeks, Shannon was free to go. But Agent Farley did not remain idle. He knew that Gant Sanders was close to both brothers and probably knew more about the crime than he had said. So he decided to confront him. He told Sanders that if he was innocent and had knowledge of the crime, he should cooperate with the investigation. But if Sanders was knowingly protecting the Agofskys and they were convicted of the robbery and murder, Sanders would be jailed for aiding and abetting. Worse, without a solid alibi, he was still under suspicion of the crime. But Sanders revealed nothing. He remained faithful to the brothers. Farley thought that perhaps Sanders was hiding his guilt with his silence.
He was attractive, articulate, and
Agent Farley pursued 2 brothers, Joe and Shannon Agofsky, as the prime suspects in the bank heist and murder. Joe's fingerprints had been compared to the 2 found on the duct tape from the murder device. His did not match. As investigators waited for results on a comparison with Shannon's, additional partial prints were discovered on the tape. Now the FBI needed new prints from Shannon, a 360-degree view to match the partial prints on the duct tape. But Shannon was nowhere to be found. Farley hoped that he could get to Shannon through one of the Agofsky brothers' friends, Gant Sanders. The agent also suspected Sanders could be the unidentified accomplice. But cooperating with the FBI would mean betraying his longtime friends. Finally, in June of 1990, hoping to clear his name, he contacted Farley, wanting to talk. Investigators told Sanders they thought that he had helped commit the bank robbery and murder in Noel with the Agofsky brothers. But Sanders claimed he had nothing to do with the crime. However, he did admit to his involvement in another, more recent incident. On one particular evening in late December 1989, Shannon and Joe Agofsky broke into a house in Missouri and stole several rifles. The brothers rendezvoused with Sanders later that evening, setting the second part of their plan into action. The next day, Sanders and Shannon drove across the state line into Arkansas and sold the guns. It was a federal violation.